Have you seen these little handheld lights that a lot of these companies are coming out with? This one in particular is by SmallRig. It almost looks like a flashlight, or maybe it is a flashlight, I don't know, but it has some features that most flashlights don't have. For example, when you press the button on the side, you can turn the light red or yellow or blue, and it'll go back to white. And it has these cutouts that you can use to help shape the light. So in part 2, I'm gonna show you how I use this light to take these pictures. Check it out. So the previous pictures that I just showed you were all strobe, but that single pro photo that was going through the reverse octa, this image and the next image will have a different lighting setup, but specifically with this image, there's no strobe. So these are just constant lights that we're looking at for this photo. There's two different lights. There's the Maxima Furiosa that I showed you in the behind the scenes of the initial lighting setup. That was how I was actually lighting the video that you saw with the R5C. And then there's these little speckles of light that you can see that fall on her face and on her shoulder, and they even fall on the table, and they're coming from a light that I'm basically holding in my hand that's about the size of a flashlight by a company called SmallRig. I'm gonna include a link to a video that gives you a full rundown of this light and its features and all the things that it comes with by a friend of mine named Sean, because I'm not gonna go into the full length details about the light as much as kind of just referencing how I used it to execute these images. But that primary light, that overall light, the Maxima, was what was lighting my entire set. So if I were to back up for a second and look at this image, if I only use that flashlight would have just made these individual specks of light. Every single thing else that you're able to see would have fallen into complete darkness, right? So that you would not have been able to see any of this information. Well, let me change colors real quick. You would not have been able to say any of this. You wouldn't have seen any of this. You wouldn't have seen this part of her body. You wouldn't have seen this part of her body, right? Like you wouldn't have seen some of this hair, her ear. If this speckled blue light isn't touching it, then you would not have been able to see it, right? Because the SmallRig is the little flashlight. I'm gonna just call it a flashlight because it's easier for me to remember. Because the flashlight is doing all of the kind of nuanced lighting that you're seeing, right, with these different shapes that are being emitted. But the Maxima light is giving me my overall exposure. And if you look a little closer, actually, you'll see that I had to make some adjustments to my settings. I'll put the settings on the screen. I can't remember at this very second, but you could actually see how her hand falls completely out of focus. I know that I was probably shooting at like an f2 or an f2.8 or something really, really shallow because I was trying to make sure that I allowed enough light to come in, but you could see how her hands and her arm kind of fall out of focus, and then her face is really the center of attention. And along with that, there's this gradient that ends up basically making the edges of the image darker, right, from that light fall off, so that there's this kind of soft vignette around her that the overall Maxima is providing, and then those speckled pieces of light are coming from the flashlight. All right, so then I'll just bounce back. I'm gonna show you some behind the scenes of me holding up that light so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm referencing. Actually, let me do it with the wrong. That's kind of fun. Let me keep playing with that. Yep. You about to do something? Okay. All right, so let me turn this light on. Get a little bit more overhead. Find my. All right, so here's an example where you see like I'm literally just holding the light in my hand. It's not even a trick or anything. I'm literally just holding the light. There's the shaper on the end that allows the cookie or that little design that had the slits in it to attach to the front of the flashlight. And then what ends up happening is that little piece that has those cutouts in it allows certain rays of light to come through. And then that's where you start to see those things show up. You can even look at the top of the scrim up here and you're able to see that that light that's coming from the overhead is going through that scrim to give me an overall fill on the entire scene. And then those small pieces of light are coming from the light that I'm holding. I'm not going to overcomplicate this. That's really it. Next lighting setup, I'll show you how I did this. So be on the lookout for part 3.